Hello and welcome to This Is Not an Episode, a podcast about where philosophy meets the world, quietly, awkwardly, and sometimes all too loudly. Each episode explores how philosophical ideas surface in public life, from fashion and faith to AI and funding policies. And I am Jonathan Tallant, a philosopher at the University of Nottingham. And Andy, who are you?
I am Andy, and I'm also a philosopher at the University of Nottingham. It's good to see you this afternoon, John.
And good to see you as well, Andy. I like the idea of you being a philosophy. I think this would be excellent. We could study you in class. This would be excellent.
What's the ontology of Andy? Yes, yeah.
That sounds like an amazing thing for us to be doing. But before we get to that, what have you been up to this week, mate?
I went to an interesting workshop on social ontology, actually, mentioning ontology.
Very cool.
Yes, and actually it was very interesting because it was how social ontology, so basically how should we understand what institutions are and those sort of things, what are social facts, and how that relates to philosophy of education. So, for example,
Amazing.
so if you're saying something, for example, like everyone's got a right to education, or this is what school is, then that imports or rests on some notion ontological claims about society and things like schools. And very interesting, I learned something about non-ideal social ontology, which I'd never come across, which makes sense when they said, which was social ontology normally starts from this idealized, all these institutions are great. And the non-ideal is, well, actually there's a dark side to institutions and there's power structures and prejudice and stuff. So yeah, it was really interesting. I enjoyed that. What about you? What have you been up to?
That sounds bang up my street. Shame I missed it. Yeah, well, so I have had a busy week full of meetings and this and that. But the highlight of the week, I think, was probably going to some rugby on Wednesday night. It was University of Nottingham men's first 15 against Loughborough men's first 15. There was a women's double header earlier in the day as well. I couldn't get there for that. And it was the first match being played out under the new spot floodlights with the new pitch. And there was some university brewed beer from Sutton Bonington campus that was there as well. A pie and mash it was an absolutely lovely time. But great to see our students out there doing their thing. Some incredibly skillful, physically robust rugby players out there playing to an incredibly high level. And really reminding me why I stopped playing at 16 when I became the metaphorical equivalent of a speed bump to them. But they were incredibly impressive. Sadly lost. Loughborough take the spoils on this occasion. But that was a fantastic way to start to have decorating the middle of my week.
Yeah, sounds brilliant. Rugby's never something I've got into, and people always talk about it in a very fond way. They often also add, and by the way, my friends can't walk properly anymore or broke their neck. But it seems like a really amazing game. It sounds great fun. I'm glad. We didn't win. I'm glad. No, we're not glad we didn't win. Anyway, I'll shut up. Carry on.
I mean, grudging respect to Loughborough, but I think one of the reasons that people find it quite an attractive sport in lots of ways is that it's often thought to have quite a robust moral code. So you've got all these players who are out there beating each other up, decking each other, but in what's perceived to be quite an above board sort of way. It's we all shake hands off the pitch and we're all good friends off it. And one of the things you wanted to talk about this week, Andy, was evidence of objective morality. What's all this about?
Well, so this was an article reviewing a book. It was in Christianity Today by Noah Peterson. And so in metaethics, there's lots of discussions around the theories of moral realism, right? So what are moral facts? Again, about ontology, about how we come to know moral facts, our epistemology, how language works around moral facts and stuff. And there's big discussions. And what was interesting to me is they brought forward the claim that actually, however, these are very interesting, but actually what matters is just what happens in our day-to-day experiences of morality. So here's an example, right? They give in aesthetics, which they just say you can apply in a moral case. You can't explain to someone what the beauty of the Grand Canyon is, right? I can have a go, but you need to just be there and experience it. And the thought is that to really do justice, and in a moral case, imagine you are pro fox hunting and you go to a fox hunt, but you're just then you see the dogs at the end attacking a fox or whatever, and you're just presented. There's a sort of phenomenology of this, the wrongness, and their thought is, look, the best explanation for this experience of being confronted by and the richness of the moral world we actually live in, none of this philosophy abstract stuff, is moral realism. There's a bit of tradition of this, but it was just a new sort of bringing it to the forefront again. Yeah.
That's really interesting, Andy. How does that gel with some of the debates that have gone around discussions of how we, if we do, how we come to know God? So I'm thinking about some of those discussions in the philosophy of religion about things being, soteriologically essential. So when you have the experience of the divine, you're simply struck by it. You can't help but see that experience as being of God. Is this a similar sort of structural kind of move here for the moral case?
I think you could probably make similar moves. It's not as sophisticated. I think that was part of the move. So we don't need. By the way, I have got some serious reservations with this, which, if you're interested, I can tell you. But the idea is meant to be just Tom, Dick, and Harry. Where it would just experience the world as moral in this way. And I mean, I have to get into the book's details, but the idea is that that's enough to prop up. I don't think it's meant to be, and therefore realism is right, but it's meant to be a data point which sort of strongly suggests that realism, right? Yeah.
No, fair enough. And if you were going to give us a little hint as to what your reservations might be, what have you got for us?
Basically, the phenomenology underdetermines the stuff. So I'm sure that our colleagues, and one of our colleagues, Neil, he's not a realist. He could give you a really good account of why we have that phenomenology. As I can't remember, it's Wittgenstein or someone would say, is you can't read off from that phenomenology to a particular conclusion. It's not on its sleeve. Its interpretation isn't on its sleeve. So I think I just don't think that's sufficient enough to even give you a larger probability for there to be moral facts, actually. So I think that would be my reservation. But I do think reminding us of our lived experience is really important. And I think there's a lot of work, probably fruitful work, that could be done in the phenomenological tradition, looking at metaethics and those sort of like being inspired by Merleau-Ponty and other people. But yeah, lots of things around that. So yeah, it was interesting to think about and that stuff, and being a moral agent, being a human being. I was trying to think of a really jazzy link to get to what you've read, but I'm just going to say you've read something on the critical thinking elements of degrees or something.
That was smooth, Andy. I was just pull the handbrake. Let's just next thing. We're done. Yeah. We're done talking about objective morality. We're going to talk about why philosophers are brilliant and amazing and wonderful. So this is a large study, and we can link to this in the notes, that explores the critical thinking skills measured by critical thinking tests in the US of philosophy students, philosophy majors. So that's people who've spent the preponderance of their degree doing philosophy. And what they did was they looked at SAT scores on a variety of different features of university students just before they arrive, and then measured similar sorts of tests on their way out. So that's the SAT and then the LSAT and GRE and things like that. And basically what it finds is that, there is a correlation between people having open-mindedness, critical thinking, good verbal dexterity on the way in. And there's also a correlation on the way out, but you see a bigger increase in improvement in those scores for philosophy students than you do for others. And so what this is taken to show is that philosophy correlates very, very strongly with contributing to you being open-minded, being a good critical thinker, being someone who's verbally capable of expressing themselves, and doing so in a kind of a rigorous and well put together way. Not like I am right now, but it's a Friday afternoon, so that'll be all right. And this is a really lovely study, right? Because we bang on all the time about the value of a philosophy degree, and now we've got data, Andy, data that philosophers are amazing.
That's brilliant. I was going to ask if you're convinced but by your enthusiasm. I suspect you are. Does it say anything about the details of what that test is about? I'm asking because I'm reminded of things like, we know that the IQ test has got some really serious problems. It's got some certain biases, etc. in it. I wondered, did it? It may have not done, but did it have any sense of what did they have to do? What were they measuring?
So the way that the SATs and LSATs are structured is that they are taken to measure particular kinds of cognitive skills and cognitive dexterity in a range of different areas already. So they've got the questions lined up in those areas. They're already categorized, and philosophers are supposed to do particularly well. And if you look at some of the research paper, it does actually walk through some of the different questions that you're asked to respond to. Am I convinced? I'm being enthusiastic because I like the outcome.
That's enough. I mean, that proves it.
Right. That'll do. I think that to be completely fair to the authors, they are super careful and super cautious with what they take it to show. And what they're saying is there are a bunch of correlations here. And there's a correlations in a pretty large sample set. I think they talk about nearly 650,000 students with about just under 5,000 philosophy majors. So it's a big data set, and you do see these correlations. But what you can't do, given that breadth of data and the lack of really targeted interventions at various points in the student journey, you can't get to a causal mechanism that's underlying it. So it's quite interesting evidence that there's this very clear correlation that's there between people being attracted to it in the first place, have these sorts of skills, and then also seem to improve them quite markedly. That's great, but we can't quite get to the causal claim, or to even if we could get to something causal, we couldn't get to which bit of the philosophical curriculum is driving that.
Yeah. Do you think there are, purely speculatively, do you think there are any other sort of factors that might cause noise? Or so here's just a really crazy hypothesis. So you might think that the people who are exposed to philosophy and might have read it or been read to or whatever have certain cognitive features that mean that would have. So what am I saying? There might be other noise that causes this rather than the philosophy itself. I don't know if that's any thoughts on that.
Yeah, it could be. It really could be. I mean, the reason that I like the study so much is that what they're looking to do is track the progress of people. So you've got that input that people who are attracted to philosophy have these sorts of skills, and they then seem to improve more than other folks do. You're right that there could still be something to do with the kind of people going in, or the kinds of people who would be naturally likely to develop in those sorts of ways. Maybe. And maybe that's why one of the reasons we should treat this as a correlation. Who knows? But I think it's pretty richly suggestive that there's something going on in the philosophical education, and it kind of chimes with other research findings that have suggested that philosophers spend a lot of their time just thinking about things, looking at the logical structure of arguments in a way that we pick up a reputation as a discipline for asking, but what do you mean by, in a way that other disciplines don't? And we have a reputation for really nitpicking at details in a way that lots of other disciplines don't. You put all of that together, and I can kind of see why this sort of thing would fall out. So completely go with the authors. It's a correlation. You can't identify anything causal in there, but there is a plausible underlying causal mechanism, I think, that might be kicking about. But I think that the most important takeaway, Andy, for anyone that's listening, is that philosophy is amazing. They should stop doing what they're doing right now and enroll on a philosophy degree at the University of Nottingham. Are we agreed?
I think that's the only take of that I would suggest. Just it reminded me of there was a very famous, influential study on philosophy for children run about 8 9 years ago. Topping and someone else, I can't remember, but they showed that it increased IQ and critical reasoning skills. This was a big meta study of all studies on philosophy for children. It just showed this. It doesn't surprise me. I mean, yeah, it makes sense to me.
It doesn't surprise me either. But one thing that does surprise me, Andy, given that we're sitting on this call having a conversation, and dude, you're wearing a hoodie, and you want to talk about respectability in dress. What are we doing?
Yeah, I purposely actually put a hoodie on for that very reason. I'm normally in a three-piece suit, as you know, for most of my interactions. Yeah, it's just fascinating. I think it's one of the, sometimes you've got things you sort of think about, but then someone writes something and you go, oh, yeah, that's actually really neat. I found this really interesting and it made me think a lot. And this was by Derek Guy on X. I just want to say I don't normally get X. It just come through something else, a link through Daily Nous, I think.
We all know you've got your burner account and you're on there every day.
So I just put my picture of Elon down. So yeah, this basically said that although it's true that often we can show sort of social things through the way we dress, so respect, etc. So you would wear a suit to a funeral or a wedding, and you'd wear black to a funeral, and all these sort of things, and that's understandable. A move that lots of people make, which is go the other way around. So they think that just because you're wearing the wrong attire, whatever that means, that you are somehow failing in certain characters traits, like you don't respect her. I mean, at the highest level, sort of philosophically, it's a bit like the fallacy affirming the consequence, or as Greg McCulloch used to call modus morons, where you say just because so the if you're respectful, you'll wear this stuff. Therefore, this person's wearing this stuff. Therefore, they are respectful. It doesn't work that way around. And I just thought it was very interesting because I think we all, if you look at how society operates, and particularly the media, they do move from. The person that comes to mind is Corbyn, of course. So he wears a scruffy suit, therefore he must be disrespectful. Don't take him seriously. Now, anyone who's got a brain can see that makes no sense at all. And this little discussion really made that clear, and I found it really interesting. And then it made me think about clothes in general. Things like why we have uniforms at school, things like how it used to be the case that you get these powerful companies and people wear suits and now, but now they're on stage in their hoodies, like Google and Microsoft, and it also talked about how clothes were a signal for power, and so a way of oppressing people in different ways. And it was just really interesting. And I think what's great about philosophy is you can just start thinking about anything, including clothes. I mean, do you have any thoughts on this, Jonathan, about this relationship between respect and clothes? Is this too simplistic? Is it the case that if someone's wearing something that's just obviously out of place, that we can make some kind of judgments on them?
Yeah, I think maybe there's one judgment that we can make, which is that they're wearing those things,
Yeah,
and I'm comfortable with that one.
yeah,
I think beyond that though, it's really hard to see why you would. So, I mean, I'm put in mind of academia, right? People wear literally all sorts.
yeah.
And I've gone to meetings where there are people wearing suits, and other people around the table are wearing jeans and a t-shirt. Someone's wearing shorts, and it's like, well, we're all in the room because we have the relevant expertise to deliver, right? And there are some certain circumstances where I think that the norms are a bit firmer, where actually there are particular requirements and expectations. So maybe, if you're representing the university at an official function, for instance, then maybe you need to abide by the relevant dress codes. And to not do so then might be signalling a lack of respect for those, if you've been made aware of them. But I mean, I really am thinking somewhat fondly of a particular case where, as a former colleague of ours who occasionally used to wear a suit, and most of the time, but he wouldn't. He would just wear like jeans and a t-shirt, whatever. And sometimes he'd wear a suit, and colleagues would be very, "Oh, you're wearing a suit. You know what? Have you got something going on?" It's like, no, I like wearing a suit sometimes.
Yeah.
I like looking smart and feeling like I've got a suit on. I like it.
Yeah. And I think that's something they didn't mention, but I think that's something I identify in myself. Sometimes when I can't get on with a paper or I've got poor, I just like looking smart, because it's a bit like that fake it till you make it. If you look at yourself and think, oh yeah, that looks quite smart, therefore I need to think smarter. I need to be, and I guess that interviews are like that, but job interviews and stuff. So yeah, I think that's an interesting. Anyway, it was an interesting thing, and I wondered, it made me think, in all my free time, I should look at some literature on philosophy and clothes and aesthetics.
I think there's something really interesting there. And before we move on, I do just want to. You mentioned the interviews thing there.
Yes.
Now there is a former colleague of ours who will remain nameless, given this is going to go out on the internet at some stage, who had a remote interview at one point for a role, and did that classic thing. They actually did the thing, I've never seen it done before, of wearing like a jacket, suit and a tie on the top half. I think they said shorts on their bottom half because the screen could only see them from the... And I really, really wanted them to have stood up at some point in the interview, but it didn't happen. And they got the job, would you believe?
Was it you?
It was not me.
All right.
It's not me, okay. Andy. No.
Well, it's interesting stuff. I was just saying to you beforehand about the we mentioned last week about AI in the classroom, and I made a throwaway comment, which was, you asked me how AI should be used in classrooms, and I said maybe some kind of personal tutor type, academic tutor would be a good. And then you said you'd read something on this type of thing, which I thought was really interesting.
Yeah, again, so this idea of AI in the classroom is really politically charged at the moment. I think there are folks who think it shouldn't be there at all, and others who are rushing headlong at it. And I, without wishing to make any comment on any of that, there was a use case that I thought was really interesting, and it was very basically this idea of having a GPT as a sparring partner. So someone you can try ideas against, who can probe your responses, come back with particular challenges. I guess almost be that kind of Socratic dialogue partner. And I know you have, Andy. I'm not sure whether the people listening to this, or perhaps even just the person listening to this, if it goes that badly, will have read some of the Socratic dialogues. But the way that they're set up is, you've got Socrates wandering around, being the biggest pain in the backside imaginable. Someone will say something throwaway like, I've had a really bad day. And Socrates will say, oh, what do you mean by a day? What is it for a day to be bad? How can a day be bad? What's badness? And just this incessant line of questioning. And in person, this would be incredibly annoying. As a philosophical device, it's really powerful because it makes you reflect on the detail and the precision of what you're saying. And as I say, having it in real life, having someone trail you around doing this, you would really just not want that individual anywhere near you. But in a controlled environment, having a GPT that's appropriately set up, appropriately prompted to, when you start to articulate your theories or your understanding, to come back to you with the right kind of critical prompting and critical responses to say, okay, you've said this, how might you improve it along these sorts of lines? I just think is a really provocative and potentially powerful use of an LLM in a classroom environment. But I think, I know I've read this, but I think you've taken it a step further, Andy.
Yeah, thanks for flagging it. And actually, once I read it, I sent my students the link to the chat to the GPT, with the caveat, this is a bit of fun. Don't ask me anything about programming, because I won't help them. And I just hope they play with it. I think the biggest problem I have in all this discussion is knowing why people would have a problem with it. Right. So I can't, if you're not saying this is the be all and end all, and this will give you all the definitive answers, if you're just saying, I'm going to give you someone to chat to about stuff. And I think one of the things I liked about the ChatGPT stuff, in the article was it was set up. It wasn't just clever prompting. It was set up with certain characteristics, and you could flip between modes. So you could be a student, you could be a sparring partner, or you can. It can give a sort of meta commentary on what was going on. And I thought they were nice features. So, yeah, I think it's a really good idea. And one thing I think it would really help with is, I think often, however much we say it as educators, I think it were about creating safe spaces and people that ask any question. I think people just get scared to ask questions, especially when people are using terminology and ideas and arguments that you think, and they say, oh, everybody knows this. And you think, oh, gosh, I have no idea what it is. I'm not going to ask again. But if you've got something that can actually help you and argue with you about it, yeah, it seems like a really good thing. So I'm going to talk to my students about it. I'll see if they've used it, see what they say. Yeah.
Well, when you've done that, it'd be fascinating to hear about what their views are on it.
Yeah.
Because I think that would be a really important insight. But I'm slightly uncertain that we're going to get to that, because you've just said why you're not sure you can understand why anyone would object to this kind of use. I think you might have just managed to get the podcast taken off air after only 3 episodes. Given some of the strength of feeling that I know is out there around the academic use of these sorts of things. So It's been great chatting to you, Andy. But I think we're now done.
Yes. I'm forced to qualify. You see why people might think there are some essentially human things that are undermined by persistent AI use, and they might piggyback on stuff about mobile phone use and cognitive decline and all that stuff. But just to have something that will talk to you about philosophy arguments, with the caveat that this isn't the answer and there might be things wrong in it.
Good. I'm not going to say anything. I'm going to stay very, very quiet on that one. And maybe we wrap up that article here, Andy.
Yes, good idea.
So what have you got coming up over the next week or so?
What about coming up? So I've got teaching starting, so that's really exciting. So doing metaethics, and I'm excited about it because I'm going to incorporate a bit more different tech and things in the lesson, which I haven't used for a while. And yeah, it's going to be fun. I enjoy being in front of students and getting feedback and talking about metaethics. What about you?
Fantastic. Next week I'm going to be going and talking to some of our degree apprentices on one of our healthcare programs about some issues in the philosophy of trust. We're going to be weaving that into their apprenticeships, and really looking forward to that. Never had the opportunity so far to teach on a degree apprenticeship. Never had the opportunity to do that. So brilliant opportunity there. Also really excited to talk to non-philosophers about philosophy, because they nearly always have brilliant and insightful things to say. So that's just going to be great. And that will be I can report back on how that's gone next week.
Sounds exciting. Look forward to it.
Super. Well, with that, we should probably wrap up. I know that we've both got homes to go to away from this. In the meantime, until next time, we will be keeping an eye on what's going on in the world of philosophy, and we'll be back next time to talk to you about all of our incredibly insightful reflections. Until next time, it's goodbye from me.
And goodbye from me.
Cheers, Andy.